Do it.
Paul Dermody, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, firstly, to the listeners and the viewers, wherever you're kind of watching, listen to this, thank you for being my first interview. Not the first to be released, because Mr. Shane Walsh is ahead of you, but I think not a bad number two to be released. But definitely, thank you for coming on and being my first guest on the LWD podcast, mate.
Geez, I'm wondering why Shane made the cut, and I'm demoted to number two.
I blame Brian Keane for the two of you being on my radar, to be honest, like, because obviously I've known the two of you for quite a long time, but whenever I listen to any of Keano's podcasts, he always mentions the two of you. I'm like, for fuck's sake, this is subliminal messaging, like, beyond anything I've ever seen.
I have a lot to be grateful to Brian for, to be fair. He's a great lad. He's been a big help to me in my career over the years.
Yeah, no, and anyone who I speak to in the industry, like, kind of doesn't have a bad thing to say about them, whether they are a fit pro or they are just like a Joe So. Like, no one has a bad word to say about the lad.
He's one of my closest friends, to be fair. I mean, I'm grateful for a lot of the business, my perspective, if you like, that he would have given me at the start, but he's actually one of my closest friends as well. So that I have no doubt.
Yeah. Do you feel that kind of in the industry, like, kind of when we started off in fitness, like, people were very, very guarded, and now over the years that we've actually, trainers are now becoming more friendly with each other, as opposed to just being like, you stick with your clients, I stick with my clients, and we don't cross borders. Whereas now a lot of trainers are starting to collaborate and kind of almost cross-pollinate.
That's an interesting question. It's not something I would have paid particular attention to. I could definitely see it just by understanding human nature. I'm kind of lucky in the sense that Brian would be the first person I would know to very much refer out. And he's legitimate when he says that. Like, I have seen Brian, like, I've had client applications from people going, I actually applied to Brian Keane and he suggests that you'd be a better fit for me. And I think Shane's had the same luxury. I think there are other coaches in Ireland that have had the same privilege, if you like. So it's not, to tell you the truth, it's not something I have been overly aware of in that, exactly what I just said. But judging by human nature, I can definitely see how that's a possibility. But I actually do think when you start to work on your own mentality enough, you do begin eventually to see that you're not in competition with other trainers. I know this is almost such a cliche, but I personally consider myself always to be in competition with my own procrastination. I'm in competition with my own stories, with my own limitations, with my own beliefs, with my own stupidity, my own ignorance, my own fundamental lack of knowledge, that I don't really have time to think about the made up stories that's going on in my head about one of the millions of other personal trainers. There's millions of clients on the planet.
Exactly.
You can't tell me there's not enough success for all of us. So I actually think you're really putting a handicap to some degree on yourself, or a limitation on yourself to some massive degree, if you feel in competition with any kind of other trainers. So yeah, I can definitely see that being a thing. I've been lucky, whether it's the group of people I hang out with or just natural mentality. Not quite how I navigate the world.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And kind of, it's one of those things, like, if you get in with a good crowd early, like, you're laughing, and kind of like, if you have that good, like, non-egotistical kind of peers in the fitness industry, like, or any industry, to be fair, where you can refer clients back and forth. Like, I know myself, if someone approached me for as a coaching client and they're really into bodybuilding, I'd be able to get into the dance, but I know there'll be someone who will be way better at it than me. So I would refer them over to, whether it's Larry Doyle or it's kind of other kind of top level kind of physique bodybuilding coaches in the industry.
Precisely. And I would be the same as you. I have competed in a physique competition, but I have not kept up with any at all of the science behind that level of leanness in the last 6 years. So I would be very unaware of my own limitations, or maybe aware, I don't know yet. But I'd be the same. If I was to get that kind of client applying for coaching now, I would make them extremely aware that there's definitely better fits out there.
Yeah. Do you feel that when you dipped your toe into the physique bodybuilding and kind of competing in shows and that, was that 100% your authentic self? Or was that, I'm doing this because I think it's what I need to do in order to be successful in the industry?
I didn't actually have any personal training aspirations when I competed. I competed long before that. I competed because I moved into the house with Brian, and Brian was living with another physique competitor, Ben. I just honestly got influenced, to tell you the truth. I was actually probably lacking it's true. I was lacking a little bit of identity. I was 25, a bit lost in life. Didn't particularly love my job. single, not particularly dating anyone. So I didn't have a lot going on in life.
Yeah.
And started training, and I started just doing a little bit of a diet kind of in the way that I'd never done before, because the two lads got lean enough. And then I just decided I was going to try my hand, because I'd been training for years, but never really taking the diet part as seriously as perhaps I could have. But then I did, obviously. But yeah, I wasn't my authentic self. That wasn't quite me. I'm so glad I did it. I actually did have a good experience with the competition. I did very much develop some disordered eating behaviors that I would have always had when I was younger.
Yeah.
Afterwards, but yeah, I have no regrets about it. But certainly wasn't authentic me. I'm a lot happier today. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. And because you tasted that, and kind of you went there, and when someone kind of comes to you and they're not 100% all in on bodybuilding, you can say, hang on, I was there. This is potentially not going to say a risk, but this is what can potentially happen if you go down this road. And you can better educate a client whether they want to go all in, here, go with Barry down the road, or actually, I was there, you don't see him all in the bodybuilding space. So I would probably suggest you kind of go with something a little bit more holistic, and we kind of deal with that.
Precisely. When I did compete, I very much remember the feeling that evening of, oh wow, I've spent the whole last couple of months trying to climb this mountain, and I shouldn't feel like this. It's such a cliche because I've heard this a lot in life, but I've spent this months of preparation, thought I'd be elated, wasn't expecting to place. I had actually started the preparation I was doing for a show that was actually a couple of months down the line. I just happened to be ready sooner. Yeah. Probably part of my former obsessive personality that I really used to find hard to control. I found it very difficult to channel my obsession into certain things, and it could have led me down a very different path. Luckily, I've managed to channel it where I wanted to be. But I remember that feeling that night. It was very much I've spent the last couple of months trying to climb this mountain. I thought I'd feel a very different way. And I felt, it's such a cliche, I know, but I felt hollow and empty, and like I had built up to this anticipation of a feeling that was going to give me all the happiness I wanted. And it didn't do it for me. So I naturally had to just go back, self-reflect, and change. And it is a little bit easier now to see, there's only a tiny, tiny subset of the population that are interested in that kind of bodybuilding life.
Yeah.
Like I would imagine you mentioned people like Larry Doyle and Brian Keane, for example, when they did it, they loved it while they did it. I mean, I assume they did. I can't speak for the people. I didn't. I didn't have a negative experience, but I certainly didn't love it. And I pulled away from it. And I do think myself pulling away from it, I pulled away from it. And then I was just, within months, I was the happiest I'd ever been. I eventually started to go into personal training. It was a job I loved. I'd met a girl. Life was good. And I think I influenced my friend Ben to pull away from competing. And he had a similar rebirth, if you like. And I do think that kind of passively influenced Brian to step away from it too. The fact that he saw two of his housemates and two of his best friends go through the same path, come away from the same path. Yeah. Both of us infinitely more happy. And I would argue Brian's probably more his authentic self now as well as a result.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you can't see the forest from the trees.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. You need to have that kind of, I don't know, until someone shines a light on it. Nobody actually shined a light on it for me. I just kind of shone a light on it myself and thought, this is really stupid. I'm not happy. But I've always been quite good at that in life. If I'm not happy, I'm the first to make a change. I knew I was not being happy in Ireland anymore in 2018. And I loved my job, but I just was training one-to-one and I had maxed out my client base. And I loved as Brian says, the cognitive stretch of moving towards something. And as soon as I feel like I'm moving towards a plateau or lack of happiness, I do think one of my strengths is that I'm quite emotionally aware of my own feelings. And I have quite strong boundaries and quite strong feelings, if that makes any sense at all. So I've always had that ability to shine the light back on my own behaviors and just make myself happy. I'm very fortunate in that sense. But I think that was what shined. I don't know if Brian's ever said it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about influencing Brian. I know I influenced my best mate, Ben. I think it was just shining that lighthouse that influenced the two lads to go, oh, hang on. Like, maybe that's not the path.
Yeah. I want to kind of touch on something you just said there, because I've done a couple of Instagram live kind of conversations with a few people over the last couple of weeks, just during lockdown, kind of just getting to know what our PT is and that. And one thing that was said is, if it's a direct quote from the film Cool Runnings, is if you're not enough without the gold medal, you'll never be enough with it. And John Clark, he's a like 2 times UK natural strongest man. And he said, if you're not enough without a 300 kilo deadlift, you'll never be enough with a 400 kilo deadlift. And I think there is that, you only know if you need something and if it completes you after you've got there. But we should chase happiness, not the accomplishment.
But I absolutely agree with that. I'm very fortunate. That lesson taught me one of my best life lessons to date, and that is I'm never going to compensate from missing this with, from a place of external gratification, if you like. It's only going to come from within. I will never take that mistake forward again. I have no attachment to being the business guy now that I am actively trying to grow a business. I have no attachment to a financial target making me super happy. I live the same life I live today as I did 5-6 years ago when I met 10 euros taking my first PT client. I have made a very conscious decision to never get carried away trying to climb the wrong mountain. That the climb is going to be the best part of the experience, and that view from the peak is going to fleet and last about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So if you're not happy when you're hiking, you're certainly not going to be happy at the top. I fundamentally agree with it. If you're not enough without, you'll never be enough with, theoretically. Because there's just so much in life you can't control. You cannot control outcomes. I was just listening to a Naval podcast, and he said, what did he say? The exact phrase was, don't, work for the work. Don't work just for the fruits you're going to harvest or whatever. Basically, don't work just for the outcomes you're going to have. Work because you want to do the work itself. Yeah. And that's where I've been fortunate enough to take that lesson from years back, that, when you do things for the thing's sake, that's almost when art is at its best. That's when life is at its best. That's when work is at its best. Before we went on, you asked me about leaving Ireland just before COVID. I did a life rehaul just before COVID. If nobody could give me any gratification, nobody in the world could see what I'm trying to achieve or see what I'm up to or give me any credit for what I'm about to achieve in life, in any capacity, and these are small things, would I still live the same life, and would I post on Instagram the same way? And it really helped me get very clear on things that I want to achieve that are deeply intrinsic to me. So I go to a Spanish lesson, for example, 3 mornings a week at 7 a.m. and I love it. Nobody makes me do it. Nobody makes me get out of bed. I absolutely love it. The behavior is in itself the reward. The mistakes that I make are part of the process. There's no fluency without 1,000 errors. There's no one day you're just brilliant. You just feel that cognitive stretch from all the lessons. But the behavior is the reward. That's a very small metaphor for the way I'm seeing life, for the way I'm seeing business, for the way I'm seeing everything, that if you like showing up and you like what you're doing day to day, and you're not afraid to make mistakes, and you're not afraid to be seen to slip, and nobody's going to come along and pat you on the back. And also with a language, because it's such a good metaphor, like I can't skip that journey. I can't go on Instagram and read a script and have people go, oh, you're the best, because I'm going to get found out within 5 minutes. Yeah. And it's just very much kind of, it's only a small thing, but if it encourages even one person to stop and audit their own behavior and see if they're doing the right things, I think it's a good way to do certain behaviors, if you like.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And like the life haul, like kind of completely overhauling your life. And like, I know we moved to Barcelona a couple of years back, and then we come back to Ireland, and now we're over in Vietnam. Why did you make the switch to becoming an online coach?
I made it because I did want the freedom to travel. My dream always has been to live in Spain since I've been a young lad. I nearly went in 2014 to be a waiter, and I was going to go. And then I thought, I can't live on 60 or 50 an hour. That was all that the salary was. And I just didn't go. Too bad of a salary to live in. But when I was one-to-one training, I had a full one-to-one diary, not stuck for clients in any stretch of the imagination. I just, one-to-one was something I loved. And I was just starting to feel I needed a new challenge. And I thought, I specifically remember I had a Spanish client, and we were in the gym one afternoon. It was a couple of months before I went. And he just said, I think I'm going to go home to Spain for the summer. And I was like, wow, I'd love to go to Spain for the summer. And that was the day I decided. I went home and I started looking up apartments in Barcelona. Yeah, and I just literally gave a text to all my client base, and I said, if I was to leave in the next 3 months, would you be okay with that? Would you be fine? Would you be ready to go? And all my clients said, you have to go. The world has to be seen, have fun. Only one of them tried to tell me that it was a big mistake, and you're never going to make it. You'll be back with your tail between your legs. He was actively trying to dissuade me from going out of fear, but that's his limitation, not mine. Yeah. But Spain was always my dream. And I knew that from building a one-to-one client base, I could probably go and build an online base. I had no reason to necessarily believe I could do it, but there was demand for my service in a one-to-one capacity. So I felt there was going to be an online capacity. I didn't have the biggest online client base in the world before I went, but sometimes you just gotta jump and learn to grow the wings on the way down.
Yeah. Just learn, like, and that's something that I think a lot of people need to kind of stop and accept, like, sometimes you're not going to be prepared for it. Just jump and learn as you go. And a lot of us are learning as we go.
Yeah. Well, you don't take a journey in life in the car by trying to anticipate every traffic light along the way. You just got to go with it.
Yeah.
The lights never go green when you want them to go green. That's how I've always seen life. It's to my detriment and to my sometimes weakness. It depends, but I would argue overall it's serving.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to sound overly self-congratulatory, by the way. I'm the first to admit my own stupidity.
Me too, mate. And sometimes it's kind of hard to kind of, you have to check yourself a little bit. It's like, am I speaking in a way that is a little bit grandiose, or am I being quote unquote inspirational?
Very good point. And that was another part of my social media, if you like, overhaul. I stopped putting my personal life up, and I started trying to be a bit less anecdotal, because I did notice that even though the intentions were good, that element of grandiosity you can have when you're speaking about your own experience, where as much as you've good intentions, it can come across very virtue signaling. And I noticed that was a trap that I could potentially fall into without any intent, because most trainers are trying to be good human beings. But not every trainer comes across well on social media, and it's just something that I've had to pay close attention to as well.
What's your phrase? Good intentions, bad advice.
Yeah, that was just something that I was thinking about very briefly the other day. Somebody asked me a question, and it reminded me of when I gave both my sisters, advice, and instead of using their self-awareness, I used my opinion and projection.
Yeah.
And two very strong life lessons. Now I'm obsessed with don't tell people what to think, try teach them how to think.
Yeah.
But it was good intentions. And if you asked me back then, I would have said I was a good human being like anybody else, but it was bad advice.
Bad advice. If someone kind of was to log on to your Instagram right now, they see either in the top line or the third line, I can't remember which one it was, no more diets. What is the no more diet movement?
I don't even think of it like a movement almost, but
you have to, because I have that as a tagline for this podcast. You have to think of it as a movement.
Well, let's call it a movement. And basically, you'll know yourself, I'm sure, that one of the biggest barriers to, I think, success in any area of life is very dichotomous thinking, and especially false dichotomies, that something is all of answer A or all of answer B with no middle ground. And what I had noticed, because I used to do this, and this was in one of my first blogs, is I had to stop and reflect. Why was I always on plan or off plan? Why was I always eating egg white omelets or 2 tubs of ice cream, and I could never find that middle ground? And I started really asking myself that question to get off the bandwagon entirely, completely get off the bandwagon. Whilst there was that internal dialogue of the on the plan versus off the plan throwing stones at each other, I could just pick up all those stones and build my own little temple of happiness, if you like, internally. And I noticed that changed my entire life. And I personally ended up going through an experience where I went through that little phase after competing where I had to, fix my relationship with food and stuff, and that went well. But I was, and I'm still no longer on or off the diet. I'm very much someone who does drop body fat as and when he thinks it'll benefit his life and when he wants to feel good for certain things, and if he thinks he's letting the reins slip a bit too quick. But I'm also the first to say enjoy life. It's a self-awareness game. It's an absolute self-awareness game. I mean, you mightn't want to sacrifice things in such a way that you go down to 10% body fat. And you might. I have no idea. So the idea behind the no more diet is just get away from this idea that dieting is something that you do or don't do.
Yeah.
Much like you kind of get away from the idea that spending money and saving aren't things that you kind of do or don't do. You know your salary. You know, relatively speaking, your budget. You've never been in a situation where you thought, fuck, I didn't save money this week. Look, we'll throw away all the savings and we'll start saving next Monday, and we'll hope to be richer next week. But that's what we all do with our calories, and we all do with our diets to some degree. So yeah, it's basically a mindset to step off the bandwagon, that you cannot fall off the bandwagon. You refuse to keep getting back on.
Yeah. Something that I tend to quote from you with my clients all the time is the fuck up button. And it's a very clever analogy. And whether it's the fuck up button or it's the tire analogy, but it's something that kind of holds a lot of weight when talking to a client and kind of discussing kind of just because it's a Friday doesn't mean you have to go all in and have like 8,000 calories over the next 2 days, or just because you've had one bad meal doesn't mean you say, feck it, let's just ruin the next week and start next Monday.
Well, I think you're spot on, because if you're to take someone who has a meal, and it goes back to dichotomous thinking, the false dichotomies, if you like, that you're inherently doing something bad. No one decision in isolation. If you eat 28 meals a week, 4 meals a day, 20 meals a week, you have one meal that you wouldn't have necessarily planned to be a staple of your diet. That doesn't make it inherently bad.
No.
But the idea that you would then go and write off 4 or 5 days in response to a bad day no longer becomes a bad meal. Now you have a bad diet, because more of your diet was calorie filled junk food than it wasn't. So you technically have a bad diet in that instance, but you didn't actually have a bad meal. It was your thoughts about the situation that created the illusion of a bad meal, hence the idea of a false dichotomy. The fuck it button is exactly what you say. It's when you go, I fucked it completely. It's done. It's over. I said that sentence very casually on a podcast in 2018, and I got so much feedback that I recorded the next podcast called The Fuck It Button. That's 3 years ago at this stage. I'm not exaggerating one little bit, Dean, when I say emails that I get from clients, almost all of them will reference that podcast, or a frequent fuck it button pusher. Or it's my most downloaded solo episode. I have other personal trainers and other people say to me all the time, even I was stuck in the fuck it button mentality, and I had never heard it said like that. And I just said it casually because it's a cycle I used to be in. But it's something nice and simple that I think most people can relate to, because our food environment isn't designed for us to be particularly disciplined or particularly in control these days. Like, it's quite difficult to not go into fuck it mode these days. But if I can encourage people to just take a step back, really taste food, really understand that food will always be there, no matter how hard they resist it, then there's no need to go into fuck it mode. You can enjoy all kinds of foods, and enjoy, like, when you want to essentially enjoy your adherent self and enjoy your more flexible self, whatever that looks like to you.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Like, and it's something that any of my clients that I've kind of said it to, like, and they're like, Jesus, who thought of that? And it makes so much sense. And obviously I tell them that I thought of
it. It's all good. I'm writing a book right now, Dean. I've been saying it for years, right? I've written more this week than I have in the past 3 years combined. There's something that has just clicked a bit this week, but I have a little piece in the book. Just funny you mentioned that, and because this has happened not that many times, 5 times recently, so it's nothing crazy. But I'll often get linked a piece of content, and it's word for word something I've said, copy. And I actually don't necessarily think people are copying me, believe it or not. We're all influenced, and I'm sure if you looked at my content and my personality, you'd be like, oh, he's influenced by certain people. I'd question more people that think they're not influenced than think they don't have bias.
True.
But in the book, I talk about authenticity, and I was talking about how my answer comes if people say, how do you react when people copy you? And my answer is always, they don't. You can copy a paragraph, you can copy a couple of sentences, but you can never copy experience, you can never copy context, you can never copy real world knowledge. You'll never be 31-year-old Paul, with my eating history, my client base, my life, my perspective, my beliefs, my bias, my stupidity, my ignorance. You'll never be that, and I'll never be you in equal measure. And I think so many of us, this is a complete segue, by the way, but I think it's useful. I think so many of us are so worried about what other people think, or get so angry when people copy, or get so irritated. But nobody will ever excel at being you better than you. Yeah. And it's something that, if you were to ask me why I have a decent business now for myself, I do think it's because I put my attention in that right place, that I will control my own reaction. Nobody's going to copy me. They can copy the words, just like I could copy your words, or I could copy Gary V's words. I'll never be Gary V. And there was a time when I was younger and influenced that I would have loved to be a mini Gary V. And then you realize it's not authentic to you. I'm not that energetic. But yeah, I wanted to just throw that out there, that, you talked about taking the credit for it. But even if you were copying every single post, I'm like, go nuts, my friend, because that message is going to land different with your mates than it will mine.
And it's so true, especially in the fitness industry. Like, kind of thinking for yourself is something that's very, very difficult and not often common. This is something that I was told to say to you about kind of thinking for yourself. And I did ask Brian. I was like, what can I say to Paul that's going to get him going? Like, what's going to rile him up? And like, I know myself that in my early days of producing content, like, let's say about kind of 4 years ago, started filming, blah blah blah, putting out more pieces of content. Like, you would look at him like, right, that has some verbatim from this character, this influencer, that influencer, and you try your best to put your own spin on it. You're always gonna, none of us are reinventing the wheel here. We're just putting our own individual vocab around it, our own delivery. whether like you're fantastic with the written word and the audio word, whereas I may excel at the video, the post side, like a carousel. And if we're both saying the same thing, you're just delivering in a medium that works best for you, and I'm just delivering a medium that works best for me. And it's each going to hit our clients in a certain way. It's either going to emotionally trigger them or not.
I agree. I 100% agree. You know, you could convert the smallest fraction of your following and have an extremely lucrative business model. I believe it's actually a lot of ego when we're worried about being copied, because if it was as selfless as all trainers say they are, then you'd be happy that the good word is getting spread.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's reinventing the wheel. Nobody. There's 20 exercises and about 6 principles, and we're all on the internet trying to say the same things in a way that makes us slightly stand out so somebody chooses us. Nobody's picking me because I can spell carbohydrate better than you can spell it. People pick me or you based on something they've seen in the two of us that they feel is worth paying them that for, whether it's in the personality, whatever it is. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, people by people, not what they say, it's what they do, and it's who they are.
Absolutely.
How do you feel? This is a question that I think you might have a good answers for. How do you feel about the state of the fitness industry right now, and whether not in terms of like kind of fitness, just like coaching, full stop? Do you think it's in a good place or a bad place?
I personally think coaching, maybe it's just who I follow, I think coaching is really improving. I think most trainers that I'm exposed to, and I'm not exposed to a lot, it's mostly just me. Like I've strategically only followed, for the most part, my favorite athletes and my clients and my mates. The coaches I know have good intentions for their clients. They want to learn, they want to upskill, they're open to being proven wrong. So I think the coaching sense is good. I think everybody's trying to educate people about calorie balance and sustainability and adherence. I think some people have heard James Smith talk about a calorie deficit and have gone to that extreme of trying to oversimplify a deficit as well, which I don't think works personally.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I've tried not to in any way get involved in, I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, there's this strong anti-diet movement doing the rounds now that I feel is just, the movement itself is fantastic. You know, healthy behaviors regardless of what size you are, with the obsession on not dieting. Couldn't agree more. But the idea that you would project your negative dieting experiences onto the other is ludicrous.
Yeah.
To me, a lot of the anti-diet movement has become, for example, is, well, I used to think this, and now I think the extreme polar opposite, and I'm going to tell you what to think in both cases. Yeah. And the message should be, I've had a negative experience with dieting. Perhaps I should seek more context. Perhaps you should also seek self-awareness. So for me, the state of coaching or the state of the industry, and again, could be my bias, my availability, is two strong movements of intentional weight loss versus anti-diet doing the rounds. That is just, like everything in life, two polarized extremes, because humans aren't amazing at settling in the middle. Other than that, I do think most trainers have very good intentions. I think obviously there's always going to be fad diets. I think there's going to be people willing to manipulate people's insecurity, but I'll always put the onus back on my clients or my friends to know when you're getting taken for a ride. You know, like if you buy it once, cool. If you buy a fad diet once, if you get stung once or twice, understandable. If you keep going back, if you keep going back into the same patterns, it's actually something I tell my clients, that, some people enter new fat loss phases with evidence-based approaches on its most basic level, like a calorie-appropriated diet and protein and things like that. But they're still doing it with that same all or nothing, well, if I go excessively over my calories, then my diet's ruined mentality, which is the exact same mentality that they quote-unquote failed the previous fad diet by. So it's actually trying to break patterns. I think people are actually trying to get. I think a lot of the times people are looking for new cognitive resources or cognitive skills and tools to call upon, so that they're not actually accepting that they are their thoughts. I could go down this rabbit hole deeply because I'm heavily. So there's a wonderful little book that maybe if anyone's listening to this, I would suggest they read. It's called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. It was recommended by one of my clients to my girlfriend, and then she recommended it to me. And she said to me, I know you don't usually read stuff like this. I know it's not generally for you, but I think you'll enjoy it. And I did. I really enjoyed the book. It's a really nice book if you're into, in any way, spirituality. But it's really going to challenge you on why you have just assumed your thoughts are true. Like, what makes you think you can rely on your thoughts? One really nice example he uses is that you have a voice in your head that runs all day. Your voice is running now. It's making judgments about me. There's Paul with his, silly beard, and cousin there with his cold hair. And then you'll see me in the street and I'll have my headphones in and I won't say hi. And you'll be thinking, oh, hey, Paul. Oh, Paul didn't say hi to me. Why didn't he say hi? God, he can be so rude sometimes. Well, why is he rude? I mean, sometimes he can be bad manners. Well, he's always so bad mannered. And then that little stupid voice in your head has taken a situation that you can't possibly predict and made a very damning verdict because it's safer to do so. And then I'll meet you later and I'll say, oh, I didn't see you in the street. What's the crack? You've already decided, I've decided that, the voice in your head has made me to be the enemy in that story in your mind just due to me ignoring you in the street. But it's really a fascinating read. It'll challenge you on why that voice in your head that you rely on isn't inherently true, why a lot of us don't begin to challenge it, how a lot of us lack the cognitive skills, if you like, or we just don't have those resources to call upon yet that we can to break certain patterns or certain thought processes that we're in. And I think that's a really important skill for dieting because it's the feast or famine absolutist mentality that's costing a lot of people, not going a couple of calories over what they said they would.
Yeah,
that's a way long-winded answer to your question.
No, perfect. I think like we touched on this earlier on, like kind of finding the grey. There's a lot to be said about finding the grey, and like the dichotomy of it, like kind of be like I watched. Do you know the show SAS with Ant Middleton and the lads?
I haven't seen this.
It's decent now. Like I fell into it like kind of a few years back. Like one of the series was really good, and it's like finding the grey man. And it's a great thing, like kind of be the grey man, kind of you don't stand out for being like too good or too bad. You're just middle of the pack. You're really good, but you're great at being the grey man. And I think with kind of nutrition and kind of fat loss approach, it's another one to kind of go on. Also, it's like you don't need to be good all the time. You don't need to be bad all the time. Like finding that flex, being very, very flexible with your approach is something that a lot of people need to kind of go ahead and look towards.
I agree with the flexible thing. It's probably the one skill that nutrition is the one skill you definitely do want to grey. I used to work with a woman. She was listening to this. She will know I'm going to say this. So she's multimillionaire, runs her own business, worldwide company, like really smart with it lady. But even on our first call, one thing she said was, all right, I'm ready, all or nothing, 100% all in. I have those skills, it's taken me so far in business. And I remember saying to her that those skills that have taken you so far in business is going to be very hard. They are not the skills that will take you far in your diet as such. This is something you're going to need to be patient, calm, grey. Like you can't even define perfect diet or clean eating in the scientific research. So like, good luck you doing it. And that's just one of those times where she had to really dig deep and reflect into a sense of self that she wasn't used to, because when you have a set of skills in life that have taken you so far, obviously those principles tend to go across into other areas of life. But I think nutrition is the one time, and I would be genuinely intrigued if people disagree to know why. I think it's that one time you want to find as much unspectacularity, peace, calmness that you can possibly find, and just because you're going to need food till the day you die. Like you can make millions and retire in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, whatever it is, but you can't just retire from food. It has to be something you can do in the calmest, most peaceful, most relaxed way. And that mightn't be always easy at the start, obviously. That sounds so lovely and simplistic. Obviously, like driving lessons, you do have to learn to do so and give it your attention. But the goal is to make it as enjoyable as possible for life. It's quite the opposite of a lot of the, successful mindset of that black or white that does serve in other areas of life.
Yeah. And it's understanding like kind of where it's having that emotional intelligence to kind of understand where being all in is going to benefit you more. Like kind of when it's your relationship, of course, you are full black, full white. You're either all in or you're all out. But when it comes to nutrition, you do need that grey. You do need that flexible approach, because it's going to go on a long ass time. If you're in any way kind of either, let's say, white or grey when it comes to your relationship, that's not going to last.
Yeah. Well, you said emotional intelligence there, and I think that's I couldn't put use better words in that context. It does really require that element of emotional intelligence, that knowledge of self-emotion, self-regulation. I think it's so important.
It's massive. It is. I first heard it when to kind of quote a lad that we spoke about already, Gary V. EQ, emotional intelligence. It's something I came across when reading it was the Ask Gary V book, wasn't it?
That book had a very profound impact on me personally. It was just the book I needed at the right time.
Perfect. Yeah. Did you go to were you in Ireland when you came over to speak in the Mansion House, I think it was?
I didn't have, I wanted to go. I couldn't afford to go. I didn't have enough money for tickets to that. Yeah. And I went to see him just a couple of months later in Germany instead, when I did have enough money. I know.
It's but that made you buy into the process a lot more, I imagine, because you had to go through more hoops in order to get there. Like going to Dublin, like is one thing, yeah, grand. But the fact that you went all the way to Germany to go see perhaps the same presentation that was in Dublin had a more profound effect on you because you had to go a little bit further and put a little bit more effort in and have more follow through.
Well, you might not believe me, but there's a weird part to me. I know this sounds so strange. I love the struggle part. I really do. There was a weird part of me that I enjoyed not being able to afford it and thinking like I'm going to build a business for myself. No doubt about that. It also did. It also everything for a reason. Like if I hadn't gone to Germany, I went to Germany to see him speak, and I knew he was speaking at 5 p.m. that day. He was the last speaker, and I saw the door that all the speakers had been coming in and out of, and at about 10 to 5, it was just interlude or interval or whatever you want to call it. And I noticed the door was unmanned, so I just went in. I just walked up towards the stage, and I just decided to see if I could just go through the door. And nobody said a word to me. Nobody stopped me. Maybe they assumed I was part of the crew. And I just ended up going backstage, talked to Gary Vee for about 10 minutes, and got chatting to him. And that's how I got him on the podcast. I got him on the podcast then 6 months later. I flew to New York. I asked him would he be on the podcast, and he said, email me right now and put Irish Guy Podcast on the top, and I'll do it. And I was like, fuck, this is cool. And I emailed him that second, like with him in front of me. And I didn't hear back from him. That was August, I want to say the 27th, 28th that year. I just remember it because I had flown from Barcelona where I was on holiday to Germany. And then I didn't hear back from him until January. And I remember I got the emails. You know, you get the notification on the top of your phone. And I got the notification that said new email, Gary Vaynerchuk at GaryVee.com or whatever. And I was like, holy shit, he actually responded.
It's happening.
Not for 4 or 5 months later, but it happened. So, that podcast meant a lot to me on a personal level. It's no big deal in the context of business. It didn't. I remember one or two of the lads were like, oh, this could change your business. It had fuck all of an effect, to tell you the truth. Who cares? It's one podcast in one moment in time. But personally, it meant a great deal to go to New York and spend the morning there. So that mightn't have happened had I been able to go to a Ford to Dublin. Maybe I wouldn't have had the opportunity to sneak back.
And it's having that like perspective to look at as like, no, I wasn't meant to go to the Dublin one. I was meant to go to the Germany one because I got to meet Gary Vee. And there's no telling, like, did you gain a couple of clients as a result of that podcast? Maybe one, maybe two. But
I don't think so.
Down the line.
Sorry, I thought it was a question. Sorry.
No, sorry.
I don't think I gained many.
It's like if you gain one or two clients as a result of that one podcast, great, happy days. But let's say you go to approach somebody for another podcast down the line and they're like, oh, I had Gary Vee on. If you never had, and he says yes as a result of you having Gary Vee on, it's that kind of paying it forward almost. It gives you more social weight.
Yeah, there's definitely that aspect to it, for sure. So that was kind of a cool thing. I was going to say one other thing too. I lost my train of thought. My bad. If it comes back to me, I'll tell you.
There's you have a couple of clients who have gone on and gotten some serious results.
Thank you. I would like to think I have more than just a couple in the last couple of years, but yeah,
we're Irish. We downplay everything. We're Irish.
Not me. I try and say things as I actually see them. No. I just don't want to downplay the hard work of so many of my clients. Yeah, I've been very blessed to work with some people who have had some quite life-changing results.
Yeah, and like we're not talking like £10, £20. We're talking like 50 odd pounds. And as of course now, just the word to address this, that's subjective. Like £50 to one person is £10 to another. Like, but for any client to kind of go ahead and kind of that's come underneath your ring to kind of go ahead and drop £50 plus, like is massive. Is there something different about them type of people? When, like by the time they come to you, have they been through a number of different fad diets, a number of different coaches, blah, 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 and you have to be a little bit more careful when addressing their coaching?
Well, first thing is I probably charge, maybe I'm wrong here. I think I charge a little bit more. I definitely charge a little bit more than I used to. And I think when someone's going to pay me what I ask for, I think they're ready. I also try and make people very aware that this is what you can expect from me, and this is what I will expect from you. And I try not to accept people if not this isn't a moral judgment thing. This is more of a I don't want you to be pissed off and waste your money thing. But I try not to take on people if I deem them not to be in the right frame of mind. Mm-hmm. People who generally make those type of transformations have generally, they're done with fad dieting. Sometimes they've just create, that old Jungian philosophy of making the unconscious conscious, and they've just seen a piece of reality that perhaps they don't like. I do think I try my best to create a good environment and a good relationship between me and my client by making them aware. I'm not here to tell you what to weigh. I'm not here to tell you how to eat. I'm not here to make you feel any way about anything. I'm here to serve you in whatever way you need me. And that is none of my business what you do with the information, but I will give you the information. If I suspect a hole in your train of thought or logical reasoning, I will tell you. If you choose to ignore that, that is fine. It is up to you. But I will not let it go if I suspect flawed thinking or flawed knowledge, because it only takes one hole in the whole thinking process to mess up the whole system. If you come into this diet thinking carbohydrates are inherently fattening, then you will go into your new diet afraid of carbohydrates all the time. But if I say, whoa, hang on a second there, carbohydrates contain the exact same calories per gram as protein, they just do two different roles in the body. That might make you think a bit different. You can choose what you want then. You can go back to high carb, moderate carb, or low carb diet. You have the information. But if you choose not to introduce carbs for still fear of quote unquote fattening, that is not logical reasoning. That is false belief. That is something that you're failing to challenge. And that mentality, that stubborn fixed mentality, is the mentality I find that doesn't tend to do quite as well as people that are open to change. I have one of my clients on the podcast, Lisa, and she now is nearly up to 40 episodes of her own. She's a really good example because she was stubborn, very stubborn. I asked her to do certain things and she would sooner argue about their implementation than she would implement. And she said this on the podcast. This isn't confidential information. She had to share it. And you know, I would never battle back. I don't know if people expect me, like, I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Like, if you don't want to eat fruit and veg, no panic, you know. And then it's like, well, what will I do instead? I'm like, well, I have no idea. Like, you'll have to find an alternative. If you want to try and get full on 1,600 or 1,800 calories or whatever it is, and you don't want fruit and veg, you're going to have to find a way. Just little things like that. But when people are open to change, when people are open to breaking patterns, you know, the reason I think it's very important not to judge people is because I have shortcomings in my life. I have areas where I'm weak. It just doesn't happen to be nutritional knowledge. And if you came into my life and made me feel stupid for it, I wouldn't last 5 minutes with you. You know, I often compare personal training in many ways to a therapist, not in the actual job, but if you had an issue with how you think and you wanted new thoughts and you went to a therapist and they made you feel silly and they made you feel shameful for how you were thinking, you would never go back. You'd be no sooner out the door. But trainers somehow do this to their clients sometimes. And I've seen by just creating an environment of trust, unspectacularity, good communication, honesty, telling them that, look, I will never give out to you for what you eat. Never, 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 never. But if your knowledge is flawed and your logical reasoning is poor, I will make you aware of that. After that, the choice is yours. Here are the principles. You know, here are the principles of money management. But I'm not expecting you to go and be Tony Robbins. Why don't you just go and save a few quid? And after that, it's all personal. Like, you could come along to me and say, Paul, you know, you can make your business 7 figures now. You can go to 7 figures a year, but all you need to do is work 15 hours a day. And I was like, but Dean, I don't want that life. I mean, I'm happy doing my thing. Like, you know, did you ask me what I'm looking to get out of this? And like, it sounds almost too trivial, but a lot of trainers don't ask their clients what they're looking to get out of the experience. What are you looking to get out of this? And how am I going to be a part of that? And when it's all said and done, what would you want to say you've achieved? And then that helps clients cultivate their own self-awareness and their own identity along the way. I know there's a long answer, but I will end on this part, the answer. I think a lot of people who've done silly fad diets have been left so out of touch with their own internal cueing around food, internal cues, hunger cues, fullness cues. And I don't think you can live like that forever. So I'm trying to make people bridge the gap. And this is a very simplistic way of saying it because I work with my clients sometimes over a year. I was with that lady I mentioned, Lisa, for 15 months. There's an external knowledge that you need to understand. Calories. You don't get an opinion on that. It exists. You don't have to count them, but they exist. But then there's the internal wisdom to know how you want that principle to affect your life. You could tell me, Paul, you can be back 6% body fat shredded to the bone. And I'd be like, deadly, man. Yeah, please, give it to me. Then you'd be like, great. First thing, no more pints on weekends with your mate or your girlfriend. And I'm like, no, thanks. Doesn't fit into my current identity right now. You know, I'll take 11% body fat and slightly less, you know, dietary adherence, if you like, because I have that self-awareness, and you're not going to come along and change that, and nobody is until I'm ready. And I want my clients to have that exact same knowledge. Someone comes along and says, oh, don't eat that because there's toxins. Oh, really? How much? What's toxins precisely? And in what quantity? And in what quantity are they harmful? And in what quantity are they harmless? And honestly, man, you start saying that to clients, and then they start saying that to their silly aunt, and it changes the dynamic of how people think about food.
Yeah, like something I always try to get across, like on my social media posts, is like teaching people to ask better questions. And like, I released a podcast today, and it was like kind of, I want to lose weight, and what's wrong with that kind of phrase, and what's wrong with that kind of thought process. It's like, if you come to me and you said you want to lose weight, it's like, right, ask a better question. If you open up Google on your phone and you simply ask, I want a recipe for dinner, millions. But if you ask Google a better question, I want a 600 calorie dinner with approximately 40 grams of protein that takes roughly 20 minutes to make, you get exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, specificity. I do agree. It's a weak identity, and it's something I would try and make clients aware of. If someone said to me in a request, I'd like to lose weight, you do have to remind them kindly that, specificity. How much? 5 pounds, 100 pounds, 200 pounds. You need to know that because, again, silly as it sounds, I'm currently in a small bit of a fat loss phase just for February. And all I've done is remove calories from my meal too, because it's the most practical thing to do. Notice it's no crazy diet. It's nothing on an overhaul. I've just looked at what I eat meal two, and I've decided I don't want the most of the fats and almost all of the carbs in that meal. I've taken my diet down by about 500-600 calories a day. No big tongue in that. No big deal. I know what I'm looking to get out of it. Approximately 5 pounds of fat. Should achieve it by the end of February. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But knowing that, and then knowing that how long it actually takes to get that. Like, nobody's losing 100 pounds in 5 weeks. That kind of way. Again, I know this all sounds a bit simplistic, Dean, but you may agree that these are things that aren't necessarily encouraged for people to think and have that self-awareness and sense of self.
It's something that, like, I'm speaking later on to a lot of students of a personal training course, and it's something that I do think that they do try to get across. But when you're dealing with people at the entrance level of kind of becoming a PT, becoming a coach, it's how do I get people ripped? How do I get people on, like, in incredible shape so that I can use their before and after picture to get more clients? It's like teaching people how to kind of retain, and teaching people how to retain a client and then get them results, and then almost like I'll become a friend to that person and get them consistent results over a period of time, and changing their process. Because if you and I teach people how to fish, or an analogy that I kind of came up, we teach people how to tie our shoes. How many times were you taught how to tie your shoes? Once. And you've been taught it the same way ever since. If we teach people how to correctly diet, we only ever have to teach them once, and they understand the principles, and then it's just the method and the application that's possibly going to change here and there. But at the end of the day, you're still consuming calories, you're still tying your shoes, whether it's a Velcro or it's a not.
Yeah, 100%. Good analogy.
And that's my analogy. You can have the fuck up one. That's my one.
I'm gonna put up a post now as soon as this thing. Why tying your shoelaces is dieting? Why it's the same thing?
That's because I have another podcast next to, like, Grant, do you want to be at Canva for a few minutes? Right, bud. We're gonna wrap it up now, but I've got 2 questions left to kind of go for it, right? So
yeah, sure.
What you're on? Are you familiar with the show Gogglebox?
Is that the? No, I'm not familiar with it. No.
Right. So it's a TV show where you're
not the best man. Sorry, I'm not the best man for telly.
So if it's a TV show where you're filmed watching TV. What show are you being filmed to watch to get the best television, where you are a complete lunatic?
Where do I lose myself the most?
Yeah.
The one I get most entertained by is. Have you seen Money Heist? Casa de Papel.
I've watched season 1.
Yeah, so that's the one I'm most entertained by. But the one where I actually lose my shit is a live football match.
Yeah. I had a feeling that was going to be your answer.
Football. Yeah, anything live football. Like when Leo Messi plays, he's got my strings. He's got me by the strings, and he can just make me dance around the sitting room. I remember he scored against United a couple of years back. I don't know if you remember. Do you follow football?
Oh, we've spoke about Messi and Ronaldo.
Oh, yes, we have. Yeah, of course we have on the DM. Do you remember the time Lionel Messi danced around Jerome Boateng and chipped Manuel Neuer?
I do.
I felt like an out-of-body experience in the kitchen just watching that match. Just how he could do that to a defender and then chip a goalkeeper on his weak foot. And then before the game, Neuer had said, "I've never met Messi in person, but I'll show him who's boss when I do." And then for Messi to do that, that was just crazy.
I remember that match, and he's a freak. Now, like, I'm a Ronaldo ball rider. Like, I've told you that before. Like, and like, I have the exact same thing. So I was watching Juventus play against Inter Milan there during the week. So they played 2 nights ago, and then they played at the weekend. Ronaldo scored 2, and that's my thing. If Ronaldo's on the television, I'm not Dean anymore.
Yeah, I get that. The reason I agree with you about the Ronaldo, he's unbelievable. But like I think Ronaldo's the best goal scorer, the best footballer you'll see. I just think Messi can make things that nobody else could do in that way. Just the close control and the effortlessness. He looks like he doesn't even try.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and like I've given up comparing because I just appreciate I just appreciate the fact that like I'm 31 years of age, same as you. Like kind of we've had the pleasure of growing up in this period, the golden age of the two greatest footballers that have ever existed. Ronaldo was going to go down. Yeah,
he's 36 years of age. You know, that's the comparison thing is over because Messi doesn't seem that happy at Barcelona, and Ronaldo's 36 years of age, and it's just clear they're not. When one of them didn't win the Ballon d'Or, you knew that was the beginning of the end of the era, isn't it?
Yeah, the decline was. But Ronaldo's playing phenomenal now. I think he might snatch the Ballon d'Or this coming year.
I'm with you, and he even already, even though we're in February, it wouldn't surprise me if he deserves it. There was another moment a couple of years back, 2-3 years ago, where Messi scored against United. I think I have this right. Messi just kind of slipped the ball through Ashley Young's legs and then just passed it in around the gay on the far post. And that was another moment that I just thought, what kind of freak am I watching here?
Freaks. They're just freaks. Yeah. At the end of the day, like, they're just freaks. And the second question: what is your Wagamama Camille Dieppe order? And now I know you're in Vietnam, so you're probably getting the top level notch food. What is your Thai food?
My which food?
What's your order? You're ordering Thai food. What is your order?
Any order that I can have. It depends on the week. I go through phases. No, because I will go to a takeout and like it, and I will absolutely burn the balls off it until I'm sick of it. Like songs, I hear a song on Shazam, and I will listen to it 31 times in a row, and I'm done with it, and then a new song, and I like that song. Same with food. So there's a vegan. It's boring. It's between pizza and a vegan burger place that's actually near here, but I just tend to repeat the order until I'm sick of that order, and then move on to the next order. What a boring answer. Right now, there's a new place beside us, and it's wraps, but they're the biggest wraps on the planet. And right now, it's actually why I asked you to do this podcast 30 minutes earlier. I told you I wanted to catch it before.
Because you're going to get wrapped.
Yeah, it's literally it. I don't live the most, when you think business, fitness entrepreneurship that a lot of personal trainers portray on Instagram, I am the absolute opposite of that. I want to do this podcast early so I can catch a wrap sandwich before the shop closes.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I love a McDonald's wrap. McDonald's wrap of the day is a diet hack, and it's something I kind of preach to my clients. Like it's sub 500 calories. It's a decent lunch. Get it into you.
Yeah, there you go. Whatever works. Savage.
Paolo, I'm going to end this now, buddy.
Alrighty.
All right, I'll just press the old button. Thanks for coming on, bud. Savage chat. Really, really good.
Happy?
Of course I'm happy. Where can people find out more about you? Just quickly there before I go ahead and call it day.
Let's see. Instagram, podcast.
Standard.
Yeah.
I'll be going ahead to anyone who's watching, listen. I'll be going ahead and kind of putting all of Paul's contactable social handles in below.
Very, very kind. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I hope you enjoyed. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
I had a fantastic time.
Excellent.
Cheers, Paul.
No worries, man.